Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at some natural ways to manage blood pressure. You guys sent over a really interesting mix of sources for this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We've got a YouTube video by Dr. Berg, some Chinese language text on quick blood pressure remedies, and even an article all about accurately measuring your blood pressure at home. So are you ready to get started?
Absolutely. Let's dive right in.
Okay, great. Now to say, in the beginning, Dr. Berg's video, there's one thing that really caught my eye.
What was that?
Well, he claims that 95% of hypertension cases have, no known cause in conventional medicine, and they just call it essential hypertension.
Yeah, that's a pretty big number. It really just shows how complex blood pressure regulation is.
Right. We've made some progress, but there's still a lot that we don't know. Okay, so getting into it, Dr. Berg really emphasizes the role of potassium, and he actually suggests that, the super common advice to cut back on sodium could actually backfire.
Yeah, so he basically argues that just lowering your sodium intake isn't enough. What's really crucial is increasing your potassium intake.
Okay, so how much potassium are we talking here?
Well, he recommends getting a whopping 4,700 milligrams per day.
Whoa. 4,700 milligrams. That's an insane amount of bananas. How could anyone actually get that much potassium just from food?
Well, it would definitely require a very potassium-rich diet.
Yeah.
But his whole reasoning is based on how potassium affects our blood vessels.
How so?
So potassium actually helps to relax the walls of your blood vessels, and that lets blood flow more easily and in turn can lower blood pressure.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, so it's not really about lowering sodium, it's about the balance of electrolytes in your system.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's kind of like a seesaw almost. You need both sides to be balanced for it to work properly.
Exactly. And he even says that having a sodium deficiency could actually mess up these tiny pressure sensors in your arteries. They're called baroreceptors.
Baroreceptors?
Yeah, so just imagine them as these little gauges that are constantly monitoring your blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're the things that send signals to your nervous system to adjust it.
Okay, so if those little sensors aren't working properly, then that could mess up your body's ability to regulate blood pressure.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so while the 4,700 milligrams of potassium per day might sound kind of intimidating, even just increasing your potassium through your diet, a little bit, could potentially have positive effects.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so just load up on those leafy greens and bananas.
Yeah, leafy greens, avocados, sweet potatoes. There's so many foods out there with potassium.
Lots of options. Okay, and speaking of doing things naturally.
Yeah.
Dr. Berg also mentions this 6 breaths per minute technique that he claims can lower blood pressure within minutes.
Interesting.
Yeah. I have to admit I'm a little bit skeptical, though. Can just slowing down your breathing actually have that big of an impact?
Well, there is a growing body of research that suggests that it can. And it kind of all goes back to those baroreceptors we talked about earlier in the nervous system. So when we're stressed, our sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear.
Yeah.
Then, our heart rate increases and our blood vessels constrict, and all that leads to a rise in blood pressure.
Okay, so that makes sense.
But when we breathe slowly and deeply, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically like hitting the relax button for your body.
So by calming our breath, we're also calming those pressure sensors down.
Yeah, precisely. And Dr. Berg suggests this very specific breathing pattern, a 5-second inhale followed by a 5-second exhale, might sync up with the baroreceptors and encourage a relaxation response in the blood vessels.
That's so interesting. It's also interesting to me how this whole idea of slowing down and calming the nervous system, it appears in the Chinese sources too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They talk about a variety of different techniques for managing blood pressure, but many of them have that same underlying principle. Yeah, it's really cool. So traditional Chinese medicine takes a very holistic approach, focusing on the interconnectedness of the mind and body. It's not just about treating symptoms, it's about creating overall well-being, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I agree.
And they actually talk about specific breathing exercises too, like abdominal breathing. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've dabbled in it before.
Yeah, it really does make you feel relaxed. I never really thought about it possibly impacting blood pressure, though.
Yeah, well, abdominal breathing is also known as diaphragmatic breathing. It's a technique that encourages deeper, slower breaths by engaging your diaphragm. And that's the muscle that sits right beneath your lungs. And this type of breathing can actually like calm the nervous system, lower heart rate, and even reduce stress hormones.
Wow, so many benefits.
Yeah.
It's crazy that something as simple as our breath can have such huge effects on our physiology.
It really is.
Okay, so we've got abdominal breathing and the 6 breaths per minute technique. What other types of breathing exercises are out there?
Well, those are both examples of paced breathing, and there are honestly a ton of variations you can try. The key is to find a pattern that feels comfortable for you, and something that you can practice consistently.
So it's not about sticking to a specific number of breaths per minute. It's more about the quality and rhythm of your breath.
Exactly. Remember, the goal is to activate the parasympathetic nervous system.
Right.
So slow, deep breaths send signals to your brain that it's time to relax, which in turn helps lower your heart rate and relax your blood vessels.
So it's almost like we can trick our bodies into thinking we're in a peaceful, calm state, even if we're not.
Kind of. It's a really good tool for managing stress and its effects on your body, including its impact on blood pressure.
Oh, that's really interesting. And, it's interesting to me how Dr. Berg's breathing technique connects with the abdominal breathing that's mentioned in the Chinese sources.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They seem to both be using this idea of deep diaphragmatic breathing.
Yeah. And that has been used in various relaxation and meditation practices for centuries.
Wow.
So it involves breathing deeply into your abdomen, which allows your diaphragm to fully expand and contract,
Okay.
which can massage your internal organs and promote relaxation.
I've tried it before. It really is very calming. But I never realized it could impact blood pressure.
It really is remarkable how something as simple as our breath can have such profound effects on our body. So remember those baroreceptors we were talking about?
Yeah.
Well, this deep diaphragmatic breathing is thought to stimulate those pressure sensors in a way that promotes a relaxation response in the blood vessels.
So sending calming signals to those little pressure gauges in our arteries?
Yeah, like telling them everything's okay.
I love that. And the beauty of these breathing techniques is that they're free and accessible, and you can do them anytime, anywhere.
Exactly.
I'm definitely going to start trying to do more deep breathing. Okay, let's move on to something a bit more hands-on. What about those acupressure techniques mentioned in the Chinese sources? I'm really curious about how just applying pressure to certain points on the body can affect blood pressure.
Right. Well, acupressure is super interesting. It's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for literally thousands of years. It's based on this idea that energy flows through specific pathways in the body,
Okay.
and that applying pressure to certain points along these pathways can stimulate energy flow and promote healing.
So it's almost like unclogging a blocked pipe and allowing energy to flow freely.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Thanks.
And Western medicine doesn't really recognize these energy pathways in the same way.
Right.
But there's growing scientific evidence that acupressure can have real physiological effects.
Really? Like what kinds of effects?
Well, studies have shown that acupressure can be effective in reducing pain, nausea, and anxiety.
Huh.
It's thought to work by stimulating nerve endings and releasing endorphins,
Oh, okay.
which are natural pain relievers.
Interesting. So even if we don't totally understand how it works, there is evidence that suggests it has tangible benefits. But how does acupressure relate to blood pressure specifically?
Well, the Chinese sources highlighted 3 specific acupressure points.
Okay.
They're traditionally used to lower blood pressure.
Wow, that's so cool. And what are those points?
So one is called Queqi, and it's located in the crook of your elbow.
Okay.
Another is called Yongquan, and that's found on the sole of your foot.
Okay.
And then the third one is called the pressure-reducing groove, and that's located just behind your ear.
Wow. Those are some pretty specific locations. And do they all work the same way?
Well, while the exact way they work are still being studied,
Right.
it's thought that stimulating these points can help relax the nervous system, improve circulation, and even reduce stress hormones,
Oh, okay.
all of which can contribute to lower blood pressure.
So it's like sending calming signals throughout the body by just applying pressure to these points.
Exactly. Now, it's super important to remember that acupressure is not, a quick fix, and it doesn't work for everyone.
Right.
But, it is a gentle, non-invasive technique. So it's worth looking into if you are interested in natural ways to manage blood pressure.
For sure. Okay, so we've got breathing exercises, acupressure. What else is in this treasure chest of Chinese remedies?
Well, they also talk about some simple exercises,
Okay.
like arm swings, ankle pumps, and wrist rotation.
Oh.
Yeah, so you might be wondering how something so basic can actually make a difference.
Honestly, yeah, it doesn't really sound as impressive as a high-intensity workout or something.
True, but these gentle movements can actually be really effective in improving circulation and reducing stiffness.
Oh, okay.
It's all about getting the blood flowing and encouraging gentle movement throughout your body.
Like giving your body a little nudge to get things moving in the right direction.
Exactly. And the best part is that you can literally do these exercises anytime, anywhere. And they're particularly helpful if you have limited mobility or are just starting to incorporate more movement into your routine.
That's awesome. So we've talked about Dr. Berg's potassium theory, breathing techniques, and now all these awesome Chinese remedies. It's amazing how different cultures have developed such unique approaches to health and well-being. It's cool how they often end up with surprisingly similar underlying principles.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the universal human desire to live healthy and balanced lives.
Totally. And speaking of balance, these Chinese sources don't just focus on quick fixes. They also emphasize long-term lifestyle changes that can help you manage blood pressure.
Oh, that's super important. What kind of changes do they suggest?
It's a lot of things we've all heard before, like staying hydrated, limiting caffeine and alcohol, and trying to get some movement into each day.
Yeah, those are all great lifestyle recommendations, no matter if you have blood pressure concerns or not. It's really about creating a foundation for overall well-being.
Okay, I see.
And that can naturally lead to better blood pressure regulation.
So it's not just about taking pills or finding some magic cure. It's more about adopting a lifestyle that supports your body's natural ability to, heal and be healthy.
Absolutely. It's about empowering yourself to make choices that benefit your health in the long run.
Love that. And to make those choices, you need accurate information. Which brings us to our last source, the article on accurate home blood pressure measurement.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Accurate measurement is so important to be able to monitor your progress and to see how your body responds to different lifestyle changes.
Exactly. So this article stresses how important it is to create the right environment.
Okay.
Like a quiet, relaxed space where you can sit for a few minutes before actually taking your reading.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They also say to avoid things like caffeine or nicotine for at least 30 minutes before taking your blood pressure, because those things can temporarily raise your readings.
Right. It's all about getting rid of anything that could skew the results and getting an accurate look at your actual blood pressure.
Right. They also highlight how important posture and cuff placement are because that can also significantly impact the reading.
Wow, I didn't realize how many things can affect it. It's crazy how, the smallest things can make such a big difference.
I know. And of course, consistency is key. They recommend measuring your blood pressure at the same time every day. Ideally, in the morning before you've had caffeine or done anything.
Right.
That helps establish a reliable baseline and track trends over time.
Yeah, and then you can see how your body responds to different things like diet changes, stress, and even lifestyle interventions.
Totally. It's important to emphasize, though, that home monitoring is awesome, but it is not a replacement for medical advice from a doctor. If you're concerned about your blood pressure, talk to your doctor.
Totally agree.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've learned about Dr. Berg's potassium theory and his breathing technique, and looked into some Chinese remedies and lifestyle tips, and touched upon how important accurate blood pressure monitoring is.
It's been awesome.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's some pretty interesting connections between these different sources.
Yeah, exactly. So in the next part, we'll look more into those connections and explore how we can put it all together to create a more holistic way to manage blood pressure.
Yeah, we'll unpack some of those remedies in more detail and talk about their potential benefits and maybe even limitations. And ultimately, help you make sense of all of this so you can find what might work best for you.
So stay tuned. We'll be back with part 2 of our deep dive. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into natural ways to manage blood pressure. In part 1, we explored some pretty cool ideas like the role of potassium, the power of deep breathing, and even dipped our toes into traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah, and we saw how these different approaches, although coming from different places, often share some of the same underlying principles, like the importance of that mind-body connection.
Totally. It's like they're all going to the same place, just taking different roads to get there. So let's focus on some specific techniques and unpack them a bit further.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm still really interested in that idea that simply breathing slowly can have an impact on blood pressure. I know we talked about Dr. Berg's 6 breaths per minute technique, but are there any other breathing exercises we can try?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Dr. Berg's technique is just one example of paced breathing. And there are tons of variations out there. It's really about finding a pattern that works for you and something that you can practice regularly.
So it doesn't have to be that specific number of breaths, it's more about the quality and the rhythm of your breathing.
Exactly. And remember, the goal is to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest and relaxation system. Slow, deep breaths are basically sending signals to your brain that it's time to chill out, which then lowers your heart rate and relaxes your blood vessels.
So like tricking your body into thinking it's in a calm state, even if you're feeling stressed.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great way to manage stress and all those physiological effects that stress has, especially the impact on blood pressure.
That's really interesting. And what's also interesting to me is how Dr. Berg's breathing technique kind of connects with the abdominal breathing we saw in the Chinese sources.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like they're both using that deep diaphragmatic breathing.
Totally. Abdominal breathing or diaphragmatic breathing has been around for centuries and is a cornerstone of many meditation and relaxation practices. It basically involves breathing deep into your abdomen so your diaphragm can expand and contract.
Okay.
And that massages your internal organs and promotes relaxation.
It does feel very calming, but I never thought it could affect blood pressure.
It's pretty amazing how something as simple as breathing can have such a big impact on our bodies.
Yeah.
Remember those baroreceptors we were talking about?
Yeah.
Well, deep diaphragmatic breathing can actually stimulate those pressure sensors,
Oh, wow.
which in turn promotes a relaxation response in those blood vessels.
So like sending calming signals to those little pressure gauges.
Exactly. And the best part about all these breathing techniques is that they're free and accessible. And
Yeah.
you can literally do them whenever you want, wherever you want.
I love that. Okay, I'm definitely going to try to incorporate more deep breathing into my life. Let's move on to something a little more hands-on, the acupressure techniques mentioned in the Chinese sources.
Yeah.
I'm still curious how just pressing on certain spots on your body can change your blood pressure.
Yeah. Acupressure is really fascinating. It's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's based on this idea that energy, which they call qi, flows through specific pathways in your body.
Okay.
And that applying pressure to certain points on these pathways can help that energy flow and promote healing.
So like unclogging a blocked pipe.
Yeah, great analogy.
Yeah.
And although Western medicine doesn't exactly recognize these pathways in the same way,
Right.
there's actually growing evidence that acupressure can have some real physiological effects.
Interesting. Like what kind of effects?
Well, studies have shown that acupressure can help reduce things like pain, nausea, and even anxiety.
Wow.
It's thought that acupressure works by stimulating nerve endings and releasing endorphins, which are like those natural pain relievers and mood boosters.
Cool. So even if we don't fully understand why it works, there is some evidence that it can be beneficial. But how does that all connect with blood pressure?
Well, the Chinese sources talked about 3 specific acupressure points that they traditionally use to help lower blood pressure.
Oh, wow. And what are those points?
So one is called Kuai-Chi, and it's on the crook of your elbow.
Okay.
Another is Yongquan, and that one is found on the sole of your foot. And then the third one is the pressure-reducing groove, located just behind your ear.
Wow. Those are pretty specific. Do they all work in the same way?
The exact mechanisms behind it are still being studied,
Right.
but they think that stimulating those points might help relax the nervous system, improve circulation, and even reduce stress hormones,
Gotcha.
which can all help lower blood pressure.
So we're basically sending those calming signals through the body just by pressing on these points.
That's the idea. Now, it is really important to know that acupressure isn't some magic bullet,
Right.
and it might not work for everyone, but it is a gentle, non-invasive technique that's definitely worth checking out if you're looking for natural ways to manage your blood pressure.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got breathing exercises, acupressure, and the Chinese sources also mention some simple exercises.
Yeah, like arm swings, ankle pumps, and wrist rotations.
Yeah, those honestly sound a little too simple to be effective. How can something so basic make a difference?
Don't underestimate the power of movement. Remember, one key to managing blood pressure is improving your circulation.
Okay.
And even just those gentle movements can get your blood flowing and reduce stiffness.
So it's not about pushing yourself to your limits. It's more about just encouraging gentle movement throughout the body.
Exactly. And you can do these exercises anywhere, anytime. And they're especially good if you don't move around much or are just starting to incorporate more movement into your routine.
It's like a little wake-up call to your body, reminding it to keep things moving. Okay, cool. So we've covered breathing exercises, acupressure, and now these simple exercises. It's pretty incredible how many tools are out there to help support our blood pressure naturally.
I know, right? And we haven't even gotten to the diet stuff yet, which is a huge part of managing blood pressure.
Okay, so that's a whole other layer to this. I'm sure there's even more to discover there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So in the next part, let's dive into that world of nutrition and see what the research says about the best foods for healthy blood pressure.
Sounds delicious. Join us for the final part of our deep dive where we'll tie everything together and give you some actionable steps to take to start using these approaches in your own life.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into natural ways to manage blood pressure. We've covered so much ground, from potassium and paced breathing to traditional Chinese medicine with acupressure and gentle exercises. It's been pretty amazing.
It has. We've really seen how these different approaches, from modern medicine to ancient practices, they all seem to have some of the same ideas at their core. Like how important that connection between the mind and body is, the power of relaxation, and the role of lifestyle choices.
It's true. It's like they're all pieces of the same puzzle, but they come at it from different directions. But now let's talk food. I know we've been looking forward to the dietary part of all of this.
For sure. What we eat can have a huge effect on heart health.
Okay, so where do we even begin? What are some key things to remember when we're thinking about our diet and blood pressure? Well, one of the most important things is to really try to eat mostly whole, unprocessed foods. Load up on those fruits and veggies, whole grains, lean protein, healthy fats.
So moving away from processed foods, sugary drinks, too much unhealthy fat, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Those things can lead to inflammation, weight gain, all sorts of stuff that isn't good for blood pressure.
And I remember Dr. Berg talking about how important potassium is, even suggesting we need way more than what's usually recommended.
That's right. And those Chinese sources also talked about that a lot, emphasizing foods rich in potassium, like leafy grains, bananas, and avocados. Potassium really helps balance out the effects of sodium. It helps those blood vessels relax and just makes blood pressure regulation work better overall.
Like a balancing act then, getting enough potassium to offset the sodium.
Precisely. Another mineral that's really important is magnesium. It's super important for muscles to function right, including those in your heart and blood vessels.
So if you don't get enough magnesium, could that mess with blood pressure too?
It could. Magnesium helps relax those blood vessels, helps the blood flow better, and that can lead to lower blood pressure.
Okay, so what are some good ways to get more magnesium in our diet?
Lots of options. Leafy green vegetables are great, almonds, even dark chocolate and black beans have a good amount of magnesium.
Dark chocolate, now we're talking. But really, it's pretty cool how making a few changes to what we eat can have such a big effect. And it's not like we have to go on some crazy restrictive diet. It's more about just being mindful and choosing foods that are good for us.
That's the key. And remember, it's not just what you eat, but also how much. Keeping portions in check is also a big part of staying at a healthy weight, which is super important for managing blood pressure.
So paying attention to when you're full and not overeating.
Exactly. Now, something that often confuses people is when we have different sources saying different things. We heard Dr. Berg talking about a low-carb diet, but the Chinese sources mention things like bananas, which are high in carbs.
I know, right? So which is it? Low carb, or is it okay to have those healthy carbs?
Honestly, there isn't one right answer that fits everybody. What's best for one person might not be the best for another. It depends on your individual needs, what you like to eat, and even cultural things.
So talking to your doctor and finding what works best for you.
Absolutely. Taking all this information and working with your doctor to figure out a plan that's right for you.
That makes sense. And I think that's a really important thing to remember from our whole deep dive. We've looked at so many different approaches, breathing techniques, acupressure, diet changes, lifestyle stuff.
And while these approaches can be really helpful, it's important to remember that they're not a replacement for actual medical treatment.
That's so true. It's all about learning and then working with your doctor to make smart decisions about your health.
You got it. It's about taking control of your own health journey and looking at all the options you have.
Okay, so as we wrap up, what's one question we can leave our listeners thinking about?
How about this? Out of all the things we've talked about, which one stands out to you the most? And how can you start using that in your life, like today.
I love that. It makes people think about what we've discussed and apply it to their own lives, whether it's trying a new breathing exercise or eating more foods with potassium or even just making time to relax. There's always something we can do to take better care of ourselves.
Don't forget, even small changes, if you do them regularly, can make a real difference over time.
That's a great reminder. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, keep taking those small steps towards a healthier, happier you.
谢谢收看，健康生活，关心您的生活健康，请订阅、点赞及转传。